you understand? Like, the biggest risk Jeff Bezos took was being you. Your existence every day. That's how much of a negative it is. All right, let's watch this one.
This episode.
Let's see. I want to see this. I've never watched this. I want to see if this is good or not. Here, this is a
my
form of
AdSense
theory.
revenue has completely tanked in the last couple months. So if you'd like to help support this channel and get a bunch of cool perks while you're at it, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/secondthought.
Who could possibly think socialism is a good thing?
Socialism is a cocktail that never should be tried.
No, it's turpentine.
None of those ingredients are good.
The last thing we want in the United States is socialism.
According to a new survey, 70% of American millennials say they'll likely vote socialist, and 1 in 3 of them view communism favorably.
The term socialist has been gaining traction for the past couple of years. There's a good chance an increasing number of people around you are using that word to describe themselves. More and more Americans are. Maybe one of those people even sent you this video. Maybe one of those people even sent you this video. This video is about what people mean when they call themselves socialists. I'm going to be covering as much ground as possible in as little time as I can to give you a better understanding of a word we hear all the time, but that rarely gets explained all that well. And before we do, I know that at least a chunk of you will be coming in with a negative opinion of socialism, and that's totally fine. Feel free to voice that in the comments or the invisible to you but very real to me dislike bar. All I ask is that you stick around for a while after you do. Politics is all about disagreement, but to have meaningful disagreements, you need to know what it is you disagree with. Let's get started.
Does Hasanabi consider himself socialist? No, I'm a capitalist, bro. I love fucking capitalism, dude. It's my favorite thing. It's like a kink, really. I love doing capitalism.
The central idea that unites all socialists is maximizing freedom for everyone, regardless of who they are. Generally speaking, socialists want people to have the kinds of rights that ensure they have that freedom. The guaranteed right to education, healthcare, food, and shelter, to participate in and constitute democratic bodies, the right to free time and leisure. All of these are rights that increase our freedom and the extent to which we can flourish and live a good life. But it's not enough that these rights exist on paper. People need to be able to exercise them. If you have the freedom to an education, but can't afford to spend even 1 hour less on the job to go to class, then you don't really have the freedom to an education. The law says you do, but you're not actually free to enjoy it. Think about it like this. We might have missed out on 1,000 Einsteins because poverty kept them from achieving their full potential. Having freedom and the actual ability to exercise it is critical. And this central concern with freedom isn't very surprising. Every political theory wants to maximize or guarantee freedom in some way. If the US had its own ideology, Americanism or something, its advocates would also say it's all about freedom. And to be fair, capitalism did after all become the way of life for most people around the world, at least in part because it allowed some people to be more free than they had been before. Because before capitalism, there was something else. Feudalism. Think medieval castles with heaped tables of George R.R. Martin-esque pigs with apples in their mouths and guys with cool names like Torf. Under feudal society, the people who were free made up a tiny group. Kings and other nobles were free. Everyone else
lived. I love this. I love talking about how, I mean, I've been saying this for a very long time, but I love fucking making the comparison to like the justifications for the consolidation of wealth and the accumulation of capital and wealth under theocratic monarchies revolved around just saying that God decided that the king should be the king, even though it was still physical power, wealth accumulation over centuries and whatnot. However, what happened under capitalism, which we think is so much more advanced than feudalism and like the serfdoms and also monarchist societies, is that now the accumulation of wealth is no longer about divine right, but instead about meritocracy. The concept that these people are working smarter and harder and therefore deserve all of the fucking wealth that they've accumulated. Meanwhile, the entire system is designed in a way for them to, especially if they've reached a certain level of fucking wealth, to continue being wealthy and make even more wealth off of their pre-existing wealth. It has nothing to do with, and meritocracy is the lie to justify that. Divine right was the lie to justify theocratic monarchies. Meritocracy is the lie to justify capitalism. That's it. The wealth accumulation is still at the top in an almost identical capacity. The powers, the right to be able to do justifiable violence is still very much in the hands of those who own our bourgeois governments for the most part.
Lived under their control and generally had very little freedom. After all, nobles owned all the land in their kingdom. So if you weren't a noble, but you wanted a place to live, to not be in total abject poverty, and to have a semblance of security, you were forced into working the noble's land. A pretty sweet deal for the nobility, because once you had done all the work, farming and whatnot, they would collect their taxes and force you to give up the products of your labor, grain, meat, or the money made from trading them with others. But feudalism wouldn't last forever. The emergence of capitalism changed feudal society into something entirely new. Over a couple hundred years, merchants gained more autonomy from feudal lords and became a whole new class of relatively free people. Nobles lost a great deal of power both gradually and in violent revolutions, and the number of freed people grew from just a few hundred nobles to thousands of people who weren't just born into the right family. Capitalism was born. And we can see how
Merit does factor into it, but you cannot outwork luck. No matter how hard you fucking work, okay? There is still an element of predetermined destiny within your reality, okay? Within your future predicaments that you're going to get into. You understand? And as long as probability still exists, and it is very much an incredibly important facet of success, you will never be able to reach the meritocracy that people claim exists, okay? That's not real. It's not real. I would not be in the situation that I'm in currently if I didn't come from an affluent background. Not because, like, my family was able to keep me afloat. What the fuck? I can't even speak. Especially in my adult years, but because when my parents were wealthy, when my father was wealthy, and then he lost all of his wealth, regardless, though, that's besides the point. When he was wealthy, he was able to make sure that I got the best education possible. That gave me a significant upper hand, which is why I always get frustrated when millionaire, billionaire defending Republicans will regularly say, oh, well, actually, only 20% of wealth is actually passed down to the next generation. Like, out of all the multimillionaires and billionaires, a small, tiny percentage of them actually get like directly wealth from the generation that came before them. It's like, yeah, motherfucker, that doesn't mean anything though, because it doesn't have to be directly a trust fund or something when your fucking parents die. That's not how people make their money. They make their money by going to the best fucking schools. They make their money through a sequence of nepotism, through a sequence of fucking connections that their parents have created so that the generation, their next of kin, can actually, have a profoundly better shot at getting incredible fucking, an incredible network and go and get like an awesome fucking job that is not available to the average working class person's children, okay? People refuse to recognize this concept, or most people do recognize it, actually. That's why they get so mad at nepotism, right? That's why everyone's always like, oh, I'm fucking so mad. Nepotism. Yeah, you're not mad at nepotism. You're mad at capitalism, okay? If we did not live in a capitalist structure, you would never, ever bring up nepotism as a fucking reason for why things suck. True, the most stable job I found was through nepotism. Everything else was part-time, precarious contracts. Are you denouncing TYT right now? No, man. I am literally a beneficiary of not only affluent beginnings, but also nepotism as well. Of course, these are things I admit regularly. Holy fuck. This does not, oh my God. Once again, I am being attacked for things that I readily admit willingly all the fucking time by people who think it's a diss to just be like, oh, got you. You're just repeating what I'm saying. Why is TYT brought up every time? Dude, no disrespect to TYT, like, I learned a lot when I worked there, but like you also have to recognize that like I myself alone have been able to reach higher levels of success than TYT, and especially when I worked at TYT. So clearly there was a little bit more than just TYT that helped me in this circumstance, don't you think?
How this new system works today. Under a capitalist society, your boss is part of this new group of free people. He, like the nobility of the previous economic era, has a lot of freedom to do what he wants, and a lot of the decisions he makes for himself trickle down and ultimately affect you. In the relationship between the two of you, it's ultimately him that has the power. For example, your paycheck isn't determined by how good a job you do, but by what your boss decides it to be. He has that freedom. Directly or indirectly, your boss hires and fires who he wants. You work for him and spend your days producing something that he can turn around and sell to someone else. This allows him to make a profit. Regardless of whether he's a nice guy or not, his profit calculation will demand that he take into account a few things, like how much he needs you and how many people out there are gunning for your job. The more those people are desperate, for example because without your job they might end up homeless, the more he can push your wage down. The more homelessness or poverty there is, therefore, the better it is for him. Your salary isn't determined by how dedicated you are or how valuable what you do is, but by how disposable you can be. You can get up and protest him messing with your paycheck like this, but in the back of your mind, you know that if you push back too hard, you risk ending up with everyone else who was fighting to get your job. Under feudalism, people were made to work the nobles' land and hand over the product of their labor. They had no choice and very little freedom to do otherwise. You work the land or you're gonna be in a world of hurt. Now, you need to work the corporate, industrial, or service industry gig and hand over your time and whatever you produce while you're on the clock to the capitalist. In theory, you have the freedom not to work, or to work for whomever you want, as well as to negotiate with your employer. But in the same way serfs needed a place to live and food to put on their table, money from employment in the capitalist industry is necessary to live, and it's not like the power is balanced between the two of you. Not long ago, during the dawn of this new economic system, most workers had to hand over the majority of their life, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, to their employers, often from a young age and in unspeakable conditions. We only very recently made this somewhat more bearable. The reason we haven't made even more improvements today is that capitalism did not actually represent much of a fundamental change from feudalism. The relationship of domination and coercion isn't all that different. It's just that this time, the size of the group with freedom is slightly bigger. A couple thousand instead of a couple hundred. And you don't necessarily have to be born into it.
Yeah. The fact that there is like at least some kind of upward social mobility, and I will tie this back to race as well as class, but the fact that there is like a little bit of upward social mobility alone immediately is used as proof to be like, listen, dude, look, I mean, some people made it. Why can't you? Look at that guy. He was homeless and now he went to Harvard. You know what I mean? There's always like, these rags to riches stories that they pump out, right? A little bit of social mobility all of a sudden is, showing everyone, proving everyone that you can actually succeed under a capitalist system. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. The exact same concept that is used against anti-capitalists is also used when it comes to race. How could you say that there's racism in this country? Don't look at all of the structural inefficiencies that is built into the system. Don't look at the criminal justice system. Look at the black person that's wealthy. See? He did it. Why can't you? Okay? That's exactly the same exact fucking argument. The exact same counter. The existence of like relatively wealthy black people does not change the white supremacist systems that we exist under. Okay?
System, for all its flaws, hasn't been all bad. In general, living standards have improved under capitalism for a lot of people. Capitalism is a net improvement, in some ways, from the society that preceded it. But just like feudal society became outdated, so too has capitalism. There have always been problems with this narrative of rising living standards, but recently, capitalism has started to fail even the people who once got a decent shake out of it. 2 or 3 generations ago, it was a no-brainer that a job could get you a house and enough money to support a family, pay your way through college, and get access to healthcare.
I wonder what fundamental thing changed in American existence that caused it to happen. Now, the racists will look to this and go, oh, it's because black people are taking up a piece of the pie. It's because there are more minorities that are no longer like as exploited, right? Whereas the real reason is literally because unions have been fucking eviscerated. If workers have no way to collectively bargain, if workers have no way to go back against and fight against the inherent class contradictions baked into a capitalist order of the economy, a capitalist organization of the economy, then of course capital is going to slowly but surely take away more and more of your benefits. Profits have a tendency to decline, okay? So what are you going to do? You have to squeeze out as much profits as possible. That's what capital owners do. And the best ones, the ones who are the best at fucking squeezing out profits, are the CEOs. They get rewarded for it.
You weren't exactly free, but you weren't doing too badly either. That is no longer true. The few people at the top have been given so much freedom to keep the money you made for them by working in their offices, at their storefronts, and in their factories that there isn't much left for you. High school and college graduates, once guaranteed stable employment and livable wages, are losing out. Nowadays, between 40 and 50% of college grads are unemployed or working in a job that doesn't require a diploma, indebted at rates that completely overshadow their salaries. And the story's the same across the economy. For someone working at Amazon to make as much money as Jeff Bezos does in just 1 year, they would have to work for 58 years. And that's just with his salary. If we start counting dividends, you'd be working every day of every year of multiple lifetimes just to catch up to Bezos' single lap around the sun. Clearly, it's time for an upgrade. Socialists look at this march of history and ask two questions. One, is there a better way to get the same results as produced under capitalism? And two, what is it? In other words, how do we keep the parts we like from capitalism, rising living standards, and cut out the parts we don't like, the exploitation, imbalances of power, and massively uneven distribution of those rising living standards? The big answer for socialists lies in who owns things like companies. The argument goes that so long as there is just one, or at the most a few people who own our society's productive enterprises, they will be able to make decisions that benefit them and not us. Your boss, because he has been given the freedom to do so, will use his power to curtail yours. He will always try to push your wages down as low as possible, make you work the longest hours you can, make your working conditions as dire as possible, because it's cheaper that way and rakes in more money for him and the other people who own the company. While he has to balance that with what other capitalists will do and try to offer better conditions, hours, or wages, every step he makes in the right direction has to contend with his profit margins. If something is unprofitable, even just by a fraction of a percent less, he can't do it. He can't risk some other company being more ruthless than he is and undercutting his business. The only choices that are on the table are the ones that make him wealthier, even if that means making you poorer or generally worse off in the process. Socialists take stock of all these incentives and try to understand how we can change them. Instead of the most important thing being the capitalist profit, how can we incentivize things that benefit all of us, putting more options on the table than just the ones that make the guy at the top richer? And we have a lot of ideas on how we can do this, from central planning, to free association between communes, to worker-owned cooperatives, to cybernetic management. However varied these ideas are, and truly there are a lot of them, they are all united by the same conclusion: that the best way to figure out which ideas benefit everybody to the fullest extent is to let people decide for themselves. Give everybody control over what ideas we want to see happen and how. Instead of a few people at the top setting the rules of the game, everybody should get a say over things like their working conditions. Control over what gets done and how, for everyone, by everyone. Not by some self-appointed class of millionaires and billionaires who get to boss everyone else around. And you intuitively know that this works. How many times has your boss made a decision you know is in the wrong, but you're the one who has to live with it? How many times have you been told that there's just not enough in the budget for a raise, or for you to take that day off, but the company is raking in record profits? How many decisions are kept behind closed doors until they blow up in your face? You might not always have the answers to every problem your company faces, but if the solutions of those at the top are so good, why are their decisions made behind closed doors? Why do they always make them better off and not you? Socialists understand that this isn't a system.
And this process is so inherently undemocratic, which is why it's always weird when we fucking talk about, which is why it's so weird when we talk about like how much better we are than like, you know, older organizations. Oh man, we're so much better off than fucking living in a feudalist society. Like, come on. It's like, or we have a democracy in this country, unlike those other bad countries where there is no democratic process. Like, motherfucker, you spend 80% of your life inside of the fucking workplace, and another man you basically are not calling daddy is your daddy. Multiple men, as a matter of fact. They're telling you what you can wear, what you can't say, what you can't do. They're constantly telling you to do things that you don't want to fucking do, okay? And then they're making decisions on your life, like, they're making decisions on your life in an inherently undemocratic capacity, and you're supposed to sit there and go, yeah, you know what, this is actually appropriate, because, like, hey, guess what? I'm too stupid to make that decision for myself. I'm too stupid to make that decision for the entire company. We can't get together as an entire company and make this decision ourselves on where the profits should go. Where should we actually, should we invest it back into the business? Should we invest it back into a better compensation structure? Should we invest it back into, better benefits? Nope, can't do that. You're too stupid. You're a fucking worker. Okay? That's why the managers have to do it behind closed doors. Because if they were to do it in front of you, if they were to do it speaking about what they are going to do to you, you'd say, wait, hold on. I don't want that to happen. That's fucking bullshit. I should have a say in this matter. Why the fuck are we doing stock buybacks? This is bullshit. If we have cash on hand, how about we see some of that? We generated that value, right? No, wrong. That's why the capitalist dogma creates fucking workers, okay? They create servile workers, though, unfortunately.
That makes anybody more free or makes things any more fair. Freedom is a two-way street. I can't be free to do what I want if you have the freedom to stop me from doing it. I can't be free if you make all my decisions for me. By all means, when something only affects you, you should be able to do what you please. But if things like my livelihood get involved, it's only fair that we all get a say. And it's becoming clearer to more people growing up today that their odds of living a decent life aren't as secure as they have been in the past. It's going to come down to a lot of luck whether you end up doing well for yourself and living what we might consider a normal life, even if you work really hard.
But workers are not owners, shareholders, though. Yeah, they're not. They're considered stakeholders. Okay, and the only thing that is considered in the process, in the decision-making process, is actually shareholder value. Okay.
But even though we see how our current capitalist society is leading us down this unfortunate path, curtailing our freedom, or more generally, how the system benefits from things like high unemployment, poverty, and low wages, it can feel scary or even just hasty to jump to socialism for the answer. We can recognize the flawed incentives and inherent economic instability of capitalism and still not know what to do about it. The historical record, after all, hasn't really proved that an alternative system works either. At least, that's what we've been told. But contrary to what is commonly believed, the performance of developing countries in the period of state-led development was superior to what they've achieved during the subsequent period of market-oriented reform. There were some spectacular failures of state intervention, but most of these countries grew much faster, with more equitable income distribution and far fewer economic crises during the bad old days than they have done in the period of market-oriented reforms. Moreover, it is also not true that almost all rich countries have become rich through free market policies. The truth is more or less the opposite. With only a few exceptions, all of today's rich countries, including Britain and the US, the supposed homes of free trade and free market, have become rich through the combinations of protectionism, subsidies, and other policies that today they advise developing countries not to adopt. Free market policies have made few countries rich so far and will make few rich in the future. That's a quote from economist Ha-Joon Chang in his book 23 Things They Don't Tell You About Capitalism. There's more interesting stuff in there, and it's a pretty casual read if you're interested. And he's not even a socialist, so you don't have to worry about consuming commie propaganda or anything. He's just honest about the shortcomings of capitalism. So what does this mean? Is socialism just when the government does stuff? The answer is no. For starters, that question implies a lot of really horrible things. You think the DMV sucks?
My healthcare company has made a decision to increase salaries for all workers by 1.5% earlier this year at the cost of a cut to our PTO. Our net annual raise is 0.2%. See, that's a perfect example. Just like when Amazon decided to increase wages to $15, they literally did so not from the profit margins, not eating into the profit margins, but instead by restructuring the compensation agreement that they gave to all the fucking workers, right? What do? They took away your stock options. And some people, depending on where they were in the process, got a $15 minimum wage, but also, on top of that, lost all the benefits they were getting in the form of stock options, therefore making less, like bringing in less income at the end of the year. That's how it is.
Just wait until the government takes over everything else. You think the government is screwing you now? Just wait until they have even more power. Obviously, a world of DMVs as dictators isn't what socialists want. Who in their right mind would defend something like that? Part of the problem is that that question is being asked in a pretty deceitful way. What counts as the government doing stuff? Sometimes government programs are measures for wealth redistribution, like Social Security, welfare, public libraries, and food stamps. Other times it's basic stuff that every government, regardless of its economic model or ideology, takes care of. Things like fire departments, garbage removal, sewers, or streetlights. In this list are also institutions like the police, the military, the FBI and CIA, courts, and prisons. Wherever you are on the political spectrum, there are going to be things on this list that you don't like and other things that you do. When you imply that socialism is when the government does stuff, and you're already primed to be wary of the word, your mind easily jumps to whatever thing the government does that you don't like, or that the present government does the worst, hence the DMV and authoritarian stuff. But regardless, that's not what socialism is. Socialism is a society in which the means of production, factories, farms, offices, basically the things that produce for the economy, are held by all in common and subject to democratic decision-making, rather than that of a few individuals. Nothing more. While governments are one way to coordinate this ownership, it's not the only one. What's more, there's a deeper problem with this question. The way we think of government isn't absolute, empty of all context. As humans, we have a hard time imagining a world that isn't like the one we have now, which means we also have a hard time imagining how our governments could be different from the way they exist today, under capitalism. And you already know what that's like. Companies pumping in billions to get some guy elected and in their pocket. Public services working on razor-thin budgets and being genuinely infuriating. The people you cast a ballot for not doing their jobs and getting paid quite a lot to pretend it's not their fault. Every election going to the lesser evil. The default vision of government we all inherit is one of incompetence, unresponsiveness, corruption, and elitism. It benefits a select class of 1%ers and only tosses a few crumbs to the rest of us. The main promise that socialists have to keep is that we can turn this all on its head. That we can truly arrive at democracy, one that isn't awful and out of touch, by directly involving people in the democratic process at their job and stripping all the power away from the billionaires that sit at the helm of massive corporations with the power to lobby democracy away. That we can coordinate, through planning or otherwise, the production of things in such a way that we are producing according to our needs and desires, not for the profit of a select few. Profit-driven markets sometimes get this right, in all fairness, broken clock and all that, but are still very often terrible at delivering on our wants and needs. Hence why housing is so unaffordable for most people, why homelessness is always so high, why education is out of reach for millions, and why healthcare costs continue to skyrocket. The demand is there. Capitalism is terrible at providing the supply. The mission set out by socialists is to deliver on the promises of capitalism that capitalism can't actually provide. To give you and your loved ones the security, the stability, and the good life that you deserve, and that is within our means to provide to all, were it not for a few leeches taking advantage of their undue power and getting in the way.
Like, let's say socialism was never capitalist. Let's say society was never capitalist and was always socialist. What would be like the world be like? Would it not be technologically way behind because capitalism inspires innovation a lot? My friend, that is a lie told to you by capitalists. Every single world-changing innovation has come from people who have enough funds that they do not have to concern themselves with short-term profits and failure. The only thing capitalism does is unironically force people into short-term thinking, refusing to quite literally innovate. That's it. Yeah, famous capitalist Einstein. Internet, GPS, NASA, vaccines. Those are all publicly funded research. That's all public funding. With no interest in the profit motive whatsoever. It's one of the greatest lies told by capitalist corporations, actually. The idea that all of these things that are being created in the incredibly costly government facilities with no care or consideration for quarterly dividends and short-term profit-seeking interests. All of those things are actually the creation for profit. All of these things were done at the behest of profit. Why? Because capitalist corporations bought those things from the government or took those things from the government or still utilize those things that the government is offering and, put a fucking nice little shiny coat of paint on it. It's great. That's not how that works, man. But that's why, motherfuckers think Jeff Bezos invented delivery, The only thing Jeff Bezos invented is the top of the hour ad break. Here's a 1 minute ad break now. What's funny is capitalism actually drives development of the cheapest and fastest solutions rather than the best ones. The idea that without profit motive, we human beings are void of motivators that can't create out of passion, thirst for knowledge or advancement. Yes, that is capitalist dogma. That's capitalist dogma. That's it. We are closer to fascism right now than even social democracy. Socialism ain't happening anytime soon. I don't disagree. I don't. But I also believe that the only way to defeat fascism thoroughly once and for all is to not let it fucking breathe at all. And the only way to choke out fascism is through socialism. Fascism is a mechanism of control. Fascism is an extension of capitalism. Obviously, you can have like something resembling, I guess. I mean, you really can't. You really can't have like a workers' council back fascism. Like that's why I always laugh at like the idea of Nazballs, because you know nationalism in and of itself is anti-materialist. Like there is no definition that there is no tangible nationalism. It is like completely oxymoronic. It's like saying you're an anarcho-capitalist. If you're an anarchist, you believe in the abolition of unjustifiable hierarchies, right? You believe in the abolition of unjustifiable hierarchies. There's not the entire system of capitalism is designed around an unjustifiable hierarchy. And the same goes for like patriotic socialists or national socialists or whatever the fuck, right? I mean, it's not a real movement anyway, but it's such a silly one because socialism revolves around redistributing or seizing the means of production and controlling the means of production in a dictatorship of the proletariat rather than the dictatorship of the bourgeois, which is the capitalist organization of society. It is rooted within dialectical materialism. Nationalism, on the other hand, is an unnecessary distinction that is completely frivolous and, unironically, counter-revolutionary and reactionary. The idea that like you're different somehow from workers in another country that are also a part of the working class in another country, and that you should be able to exploit those workers in another country, specifically because you live in this other country that is national socialist or whatever the fuck, is a silly one. And history has shown time and time again that nationalism is actually the foundational principle of said movements, not socialism. It's just anti-communist. It always turns into an anti-communist, counter-revolutionary, reactionary movement. Is imperialism also basically capitalism? Well, one could say that it's the final state of capitalism. Imperialism, that is. It is a necessity under capitalism. The highest form. Think about that. Wow, those words, did you make those up? Yeah, totally. It wasn't someone else who said those words. Yeah, no, I made those up. I made words like that up myself.
Of everyone getting a livable baseline to build upon. In short, no. Socialism is not when the government does stuff. You get to decide what gets done. You participate more directly than before in the decisions that affect your day-to-day life. Socialists aren't against competition. We're also big fans of innovation, but we don't want to see competition and innovation being used as excuses to push most people towards poverty and make the lucky remaining few ludicrously wealthy. Still, this all sounds well and good in theory, but socialism doesn't work in practice, right? And here we have to pause for a second and understand that socialism, like capitalism, exists on a continuum of policies and ideas. There is no fully capitalist experiment, just like there is no fully socialist experiment. Saying socialism doesn't work is as wrong-headed as saying capitalism doesn't work. More generally, though, it's not like there's a good experimental method to base that conclusion off of. It's not like we can take two countries, control for all their differences, and let them run loose with each economic model. No two countries are the same, start off from the same point, or exist in a vacuum. We can't compare country A to country B and call it a day. Socialist experiments often happened in countries that were poorer to start off with, and generally speaking had to contend with a global economy managed by capitalist adversaries. If this were a scientific experiment, it wouldn't get published. That being said, we can look to the archives of countries that have experimented with mostly socialist economics and see how successful they were, despite the circumstances. One place we might look is Salvador Allende's socialist Chile. Allende was a socialist who won the Chilean presidential election of 1970. In his few short years as president, and we'll get to why they were so short in just a minute, Allende brought incredible changes to Chilean society. He raised wages. Real wages increased by around 22% in the first full year of his presidency.
The original 9/11.
He lowered taxes. 35% of Chileans were no longer taxed at all. He reined in inflation, lowering it by over 10 points. He funded massive housing programs, building tens of thousands of affordable homes all across the country. Education also got a big boost, and enrollment at all educational levels grew. Universities in particular were made free, increasing enrollment by nearly 90%. Hospitals and other medical centers were opened across the country, particularly in underserved, rural, and poor areas. Allende extended maternity leave, doubling it from 6 to 12 weeks. Chile saw a dramatic decrease in poverty, and generally speaking, more people could more fully enjoy their lives. And interestingly enough, the bulk of this new economy was organized through Project Cybersign, a decentralized network of computers that would take anonymous, self-reported, and voluntary updates from workers in productive enterprises across Chile to identify areas where resources needed to be redirected. The democratic economy in Chile was highly responsive to fluctuating changes, and Chileans reaped the rewards. GDP grew.
You probably want to see this, but I got a 6-figure job with a pension doing policy, regulatory work for one of the most progressive unions in the country, and it's partially because of you. Thanks, son. Oh, man, it's because of you, motherfucker. Thank you. Good shit.
7% in the first year, production by 13, and consumption by 11. By kicking out capitalist enterprises, not only did the Chilean economy work for more people, it worked better, period. This kind of response wasn't welcomed by everyone, though. Allow me to pull quotes from a particular document, the Church Commission Report on Chile, one of the only documents released by the American government to the public about the extent of its intelligence agency's intervention in a foreign country. These are all things the US is actually admitting to.
Bro, that's a flex, by the way. Make no mistake.
Covert American activity was a factor in almost every major election in Chile in the decade between 1963 and 1973. In several instances, the United States intervention was massive. The 1964 presidential election was the most prominent example of a large-scale election project. The Central Intelligence Agency spent more than $2.6 million, $24 million in today's dollars, in support of the election of the opposition. More than half of the Christian Democratic candidate's campaign was financed by the United States. The most extensive.
Why would they do that, you think? Why do you guys think that America was doing that? That's so weird. Good documentary. Wait, Jake Tran did a fucking video on... Dude, this person is an enigma, okay? I will never understand. What the fuck is up with this dude, Jake Tran? Like, half the videos I watch of him are literally just straight libertarian garbage. And then what? He's like actually defending... They're so fucking weird, bro. I do not understand it. It like hurts my brain.
Extensive covert action activity in Chile was propaganda. It was relatively cheap. In addition to buying propaganda piecemeal, the station often purchased it wholesale by subsidizing Chilean media organizations friendly to the United States. The CIA supported or even founded friendly media outlets which might not have existed in the absence of agencies.
Surely this doesn't exist anymore, dude. I mean, you know, it's just when we have like, we certainly would never have like an endowment for, I don't know, democracy and freedom building or something. Surely would never do such a thing in this day and age, right? I mean, we would never, this would not be like a national endowment like that. That would not happen, right? We would not have like free radio initiatives, if you want to call it that, you know, that are suspiciously called radio free, that are built by the Joe Biden's bike pedal. Thank you for the 5 gifted subs. Yeah, like free radio, radio free. That would not happen, obviously. You're so silly. Like what's next? You're going to tell me that like America's arm that does works under the State Department that does like aid, for example, is actually a way for the CIA to sometimes sneak in arms to countries under the guise that they're, you know, giving them fucking bread. No, that's like so dumb. You're so dumb. There's no political capital that you could purchase in other countries by like giving them aid. That's not a thing that could ever happen. What's next? You're going to tell me that like the American government literally tried to fucking build a fake Twitter in Cuba and then got their shit owned, and the express purpose of the fake Twitter that they built in Cuba was to subvert the Cuban government? No, that they would never spend money stupidly like that. Like they would never fund, I don't know, Cuban rappers with the hopes that like they could spark up a anti-communist counter revolution in Cuba, for example. That would never happen. With the power of rap music, that sounds like some silly bitch shit. Like what they thought, like Lin-Manuel Miranda was gonna fucking was going to destroy Cuba. Is that what they think? I mean, they would never do that with taxpayer money, of course. everything I just said, I said sarcastically. The American government continues to do every single thing that I just said. It's well documented. It's not even a fucking like conspiracy theory or anything like that. They openly mention all the things that I've told you thus far.
Support. The United States' covert efforts to affect the course of Chilean politics reached a peak in 1970. The CIA was directed to undertake an effort.
You literally streaming a platform started by a rich capitalist who took a risk? Yeah, dude, his risk was so fucking vast, thank God. Except he didn't he bought this platform, you idiot. That bald fuck literally got like, what, $250,000 to like, what, invent the concept of a fucking internet library? Is that, wow, revolutionary, dog. You know, do you just like go to your public library and go, oh, look at that. That's fucking crazy. The government's, what? This is like Amazon except free. What the fuck? Is that what you do? Do you just like walk into a fucking library and go, whoa, oh, did they know this is happening? Did somebody know that this was happening? Right here, it's like Amazon, but free, dude. What the fuck? Like, is that what you do? You're like, oh my God. I'm so glad that Jeff Bezos privatized what already exists in the form of a fucking public library, and then literally through a sequence of some of the most predatory capitalist practices, became the single fucking monopolizing force on e-commerce, and then turned around and kept buying a bunch of shit, including this fucking platform, so that they could monopolize the live streaming sector. That's crazy, dude. Ugh! I love Jeff Bezos. I suck his dick every night. Oh my God, that's what you sound like, you bootlicking cuck. Holy shit. Real risk. You've been giving me money for 4 months. You haven't learned anything? What the fuck's wrong with you? That's crazy. Woo. No bid AWS contracts too. Yeah, I mean, Amazon has its tentacles and everything, so. Also, the risk that Jeff Bezos, Daddy Bezos, has, you want to know what the risk is for a capital owner? You want to know? It's going to hurt your feelings. It's becoming you. You're a fucking worker. Their largest risk of a capital owner, the largest risk that they're taking is going back to a lifetime of servile fucking working class existence, okay? That's it. It's not like when you lose your fucking business, you get killed. It's not like when you lose your business, they throw you in fucking jail, unless you're literally violating the law, okay? The biggest risk that a capital owner takes is to become a worker once again. And the reason why you, a dumbass fucking servile little piglet, it doesn't recognize the inherent contradictions there is because the system is designed in a way to make you think, oh my God, look at the risk. Look at the fucking risk. Such a big risk for him. Do you understand? Like, the biggest risk Jeff Bezos took was being you. Your existence every day. That's how much of a negative it is. Okay? That's crazy. That's crazy that being a fucking working class schlub, Joe Schmo, and then fucking turning around and being like, brother, man, Amazon took a big risk. Dude, you're literally, the risk is you. You are the risk. Living like you.
To promote a military coup in Chile to prevent the accession to power of Salvador Allende. In summary, the White House, intelligence community, multinational corporations, and military wasted millions trying to stop a popular candidate getting elected in a democratic election, and when it failed, wasted another set of millions trying to depose the guy who had improved Chile by nearly every metric. Their first coup attempt in 1970 would fail, but 3 years later, the US efforts would succeed. Allende was ousted as president, opting to take his own life rather than be captured when the Chilean army hopped up on CIA money, took over the presidential building. What followed was a new era of American puppet government that—
This, of course, is like one of the countless fucking instances where America has installed people exactly like this, or failed to install a person like this, or maintain their power, like in Cuba, for example.
Imprisoned, tortured, and killed hundreds of thousands of people. And Allende's story isn't particularly unique. There are echoes of this story all around the world, everywhere socialist alternatives started doing a little too well. We don't have a magic button to rewind the clock and try this again. We can't for sure know if things would have happened differently if by some accident of history, socialism had become our global economic model all those years ago when capitalism was born. But we can still try to imagine what we can do from this point forward. There's no doubt that this video won't have answered all your questions. Imagining a different world is a tedious thing to do, and there are a lot of concerns to be addressed. And it's also usually easier to ask questions about something in the future than turn around and ask those same questions about the system we have right now. If we were as critical with our present society as we are with that of the future, would we still choose it? In any case, I've put a link below to a short pamphlet put together by Verso and Jacobin magazine. Most questions people have when first encountering socialist theory are answered in a few short conversational pages. There's answers to questions about human nature, property, authoritarianism, laziness, and other things that are typically concerning, answered in a fair way by people who believe in a socialist future. I'm one of those people who believes that a better world is possible. You've probably seen absurd caricatures of socialists on TV. The Red Scare never really went away. But I hope this video helps to show that we're pretty normal people. We just think that what we have right now isn't working, and it's time to make a change.
There you go. Kind of an Orientalist narrative, the 73 Chilean coup, and underplays the fucked up local elite. Of course, the US via the CIA had a role, but it's less than what it seems. Only speaking on the Chilean case, because I don't know much in other places. What you are experiencing or what you're explaining here is literally just every place where America has had a successful coup. Yeah. Or even continues to try to have successful coups. What do you think? The Chamber of Commerce didn't play a fucking significant role, backed by local billionaires in Venezuela? Oh, wait, that's exactly what they did. It's always the local capital owners that go to Big Daddy America and say, hey, Big Daddy America, please, please, these guys are doing socialism. It's really fucked up, dude. Hey, actually, dude, they might literally be fucking positive. They might feel positive about the USSR. God forbid. That's how it works. Yeah, they say, America, I'm stuck. Please. Step America. Step all over me. One dime? No, man. Stop. Bro, I watched one fucking video that's like theory adjacent, and immediately all of you fucking nerds in the Discord, did you get like a notification in your Splinter Discord? The Marxist-Leninist Hassan Haters Fund, or the remaining Marxist-Leninist Vanguard that still watches Hasanabi Discord? You're like all out in fucking full force. You're like, dude, come on, watch this one, watch this one, watch this one, watch this one. You watch like a theory adjacent video. We must watch more of this.